You talked about having been in Forbes, you talked about having been in magazines. How have you got so noticed from so early on?
I was not fully expressing myself. I'm not being organised enough. I'm not being ambitious enough. I'm not being strategic enough. I had a panic attack on my way to work. I thought I was going to die. I understood that is not how human beings grow and thrive. When you know you need to move on and you hang around, you're now inflicting harm on yourself and you're making things a lot worse for everyone involved, including yourself. I have learnt my lesson. When it's time to change, I need to change.
Today's guest is Tamu Thomas. Tamu is a sought-after speaker. She's a thought leader, and she's also a Hay House published author. In today's episode, you're going to hear about her own work around toxic productivity, how passionate she is about going into workplaces and working with middle management and women who simply work too much, how she's brought joy into her own life, and how her ADHD diagnosis has changed the traditional model of business that many of us think that we need to follow, and how she's got to do it so that she is more engaged and more passionate with the work that she is doing. Welcome to Don't Work Harder, the business show brought to you by Atomic, and I'm your host, Suman Randhawa. This is the show where we teach you how you can take huge leaps in your business, not just by working harder, but by working braver. Tamu, welcome. It's so lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. When I found out the name of your book, I was like, okay. I know you're a former Atomicon speaker, which is probably where I first saw you, but there felt like a real alignment in getting you on today because your book is called Women Who Work Too Much, and you're a Hay House published author. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay. You're really quite honest about 2024. On one hand, like, what a huge year for you to be a published Hay House author, easy for me to say. But the other thing that you were saying is that there felt like there was a little bit of misalignment for you. Can you set the scene for me? Like, what was going on for you in 2024 then?
So first of all, publishing a book is a huge deal, especially when you're somebody who has always had a vision of having books published. It's almost like all of the expectation, anticipation, it all comes all at once. And also I'm neurodivergent, and I run my own business. And in the business I have, traditionally, what would happen was I would work towards launching something, I would launch it, and I would get on with it, and then I'd be able to move on to the next thing. With a book, it is a continuous process of marketing and promoting that book, which is really challenging for a brain that has been ready to move on.
You were diagnosed officially, is that in 2024 as well?
No, that was in 2023. March 23.
Right, so the year before the book was coming out.
Yeah.
And for you, how significant has that been in where the business is and where you are as a brand now?
That has been what has, I would like to say, I decided it forced me.
Right.
To be different, not just in my work, but it absolutely forced me to work differently. So I write about toxic productivity because that's my default. I am somebody who can work really, really hard. And it's not the same as people, like I do have what we would consider to be type A tendencies. I'm very ambitious and all of that. But toxic productivity is much more about pleasing and approving, whereas type A is it's like pleasing and approving through behaviors where people say, oh, isn't she nice? She's so helpful. I can rely on that person. Whereas type A qualities are much more about, look at her go. She sets her mind to something and she'll go off and do it. So even though they have a similar route, they present differently, and one can be mistaken for the other. And what I recognized is that because I felt so misunderstood, my coping strategy was trying to be who I thought people wanted me to be, as opposed to me being who I know I'm supposed to be. So in my previous model of work, I burn out of social work, okay? I worked in social work and I always said to myself, the moment my passion goes, I need to stop this job because you have such a huge impact on the lives of people. To a lesser or greater degree, you're playing God. And it got to a point where I changed how I work. So rather than working as an employee, I became an independent social worker. I've always wanted to have my own business and I just thought it's going to be a social work business. And even though I changed how I worked, the passion still wasn't there. I felt really low. I had no energy. I literally felt like I was scraping the dregs of my energy to be able to live my life, parent my child and do my stuff. So when I became independent, I was still having those similar experiences. Right. But I made it's my fault. I'm not being organized enough. I'm not being ambitious enough. I'm not being strategic enough. And on one day on the way to work, I had a panic attack on my way to work. I thought I was going to die. I'd never experienced anything as significant as that. I'd had minor versions of it. Yeah. And I was just like, oh, I'm just a little bit anxious. It's fine. And I got myself together, went to court, gave bombastic evidence, but I went to see the doctor and they explained that it was a panic attack. When I had the ADHD diagnosis, I realized I couldn't just plan my way out. I needed to change my operating system so that I was able to support myself and care for myself rather than try to optimize myself all the time. So my ADHD diagnosis in March just made it abundantly clear that I needed to change everything. But in March, I was writing my book. That was one of the catalysts for me going for the assessment. Right. I told myself before, you haven't got ADHD, you're just unorganized, you just need to do this, you're perimenopausal. And then I was really having difficulty with writing my book. It felt like being back at school. And I thought, this is more than just a lack of organization. I just felt very, very shaky inside. And coincidentally or not, I was clearing out a drawer and I found an envelope my dad had given me. And there were school reports from when I was 5 and 6. And I read those school reports. I was like, listen, you better book that assessment straight away. So that assessment process, it was very unraveling, because I just felt like there were so many periods in my life where I could have handled myself with so much more care and love and compassion. And it just gave me permission to do things the way I need to do them rather than continuously trying to conform and squash myself into a box that I just cannot fit into.
And it's interesting because there are so many creatives and entrepreneurs that are finding themselves kind of expectedly as neurodiverse. Yeah. And that's why I wanted to definitely touch on that. But actually something else that's coming through here is, so when I was doing my research, I mean, Tamu, you've had everything from a fashion label to, as you said, you've been a social worker. And I would love to understand kind of how you've evolved through how label is probably exactly the wrong word for you. But if I was going to say, I saw like somatic coach, I saw life coaching, I saw business coaching, toxic productivity coach. What do you define your work as? And how do you know when to stick or twist? We're going to take a short pause to hear from one of our sponsors. Sponsors help us make the best show possible. Don't Work Harder is sponsored by Constant Contact, the digital marketing platform built with small business owners in mind. With Constant Contact, you can grow your contacts list, send out more emails, organise social media and events, and simply get more done with their advanced automation tools. It's everything you need to grow your business, advance your automation, and attract more of the right customers all in one place. Visit constantcontact.com to get started. What do you define your work as, and how do you know when to stick or twist?
Fundamentally, my work is about people, particularly women and women who have multiple intersections. I want them to experience themselves as powerful. Okay. I want them to create life, work, love, that enables them to show up as the full expression of themselves. When I had my experience of burnout, what I realized was that I was not fully expressing myself. I was squeezing and squashing myself, conforming, trying to please what I thought people wanted. And when I looked around, I saw so many examples of women living like in partial suppression. Even women we perceive to be really powerful, I was, you know, whether it's nurture, whether it's nature, whether it's my career, when people are talking like up here, I'm always looking like, I want to know what's going on underneath. What are the emotional drivers? Lots of people are like, let's mind over matter it. I'm like, no, let's feel the feelings and feel our way through. And what I was seeing was so many women who were playing down their ambition, whatever that was, and trying to conform to societal expectations. And so when I had the fashion business, it was about supporting women to express themselves through clothes.
Right.
And I don't know which bit of the fashion you found, but prior to having my Live 360 business, I had a fashion business that used African textiles. And I worked with African artisans to create these clothing. And it was because I wanted seamstresses and tailors in Sierra Leone, the country my parents are from,
right,
to be able to do their work and earn a fair wage whilst I was doing something that empowered people around the world. So it's always been about operating in power. And what I recognized through writing my book, through the conversations that were emerging through there, is that I wasn't operating in power. I was doing what I could do. I was doing what was logical, but what's logical has never ever really made sense for me. And I just thought, I can continue trying to do what makes sense, or I can allow myself to be a bit of an anomaly and do what I feel truly called to do. And I want women to work in ways that help them feel powerful. I want women to utilize their ambition to support them living a good life. And I want to do that through helping women work smart instead of working hard.
And when we think about kind of how that evolution comes through in terms of now attracting clients versus when you first started out, how have you found your sweet spot with that?
I feel like it's still the same. I really do feel like it's still the same. The message has changed, because previously I was working with individuals. I was working primarily with people who were stuck in their freeze response.
Yeah.
So they have all of the ideas, they got all the will, but we know that willpower doesn't really work. And they had lots of trauma that was preventing them from taking action. And then when I was working with people, the premise was it was supporting them to experience more joy.
Like if you were wanting to do even more of the thought leader piece, even more of the kind of stepping on stages, no more running a group program, which I know you have run in the past, is that right?
Yeah.
How was there like an announcement around that? How did you kind of let go of that part of your business?
I told my clients, so I had a membership community at the time and a group program. I told them that I would be closing the program and I gave them notice. Yeah. We had a nice closing ceremony and that was that.
Did you feel at that point that, oh, I must, because, you know, I hear this all the time when I'm working with people, I must have something that I have to give them. It's like almost like this feeling of responsibility. Did you feel like I'm closing the doors on this, but I somehow have to offer them something else?
No.
Okay.
I definitely did feel, I felt a sense of loss and grief. Yeah. And I knew that there were some people that were going to feel let down. But I knew that I wasn't letting them down. They felt let down because the group space was going. There's a difference. And, I have learnt my lesson. When it's time to change, I need to change. When you hang around, when you know you need to move on and you hang around, you're now inflicting harm on yourself and you're making things a lot worse for everyone involved, including yourself. So when I need to change, I'm changing. I'm not hanging around for anybody. Previous versions of me would have been riddled with guilt, trying to make some kind of something. No, because I delivered what I said I was going to deliver and then some. it's time to move on. I'm also aware that people always say they learn as much from what I teach as they do from observing me.
Yeah, that's
so
so
I
true.
also know that part of my role is I am a role model, and it gave people permission to do what they wanted to do as well.
Love that. And I think a lot of people will find that really interesting because, again, as we evolve, we have to think about what we let go of and what we move into.
Yeah.
What was your notice period that you gave people?
So I think with the group program, I deliberately didn't enroll people, and I had a number of people that were going to finish at the same time. So I said to other people, you can hang around if you want. The group is going to end on whatever date it was. So that's what happened. And then with the membership community, I think I gave a month. I didn't want it to be, it definitely wasn't more than a month. I didn't want it to be dragging on. I wanted enough time for me to be able to organize myself and do the closing ceremony that I wanted to do. Yeah, I think it was about a month.
And then the practical sides, because you have one of the most thorough websites I have come across. It's a really good website. I don't know who did it. Was that then, was that like the practical piece? It was like, right, we need to make sure it's very clear on the website what is available to people. Like, was there a practical element that went with it?
Let me tell you something.
Please.
If you had looked at that website a month ago, it would not have looked like, I can't remember.
Timing.
Absolutely. I can't remember what I was doing. Maybe I was speaking somewhere and I thought, you cannot go to this place and speak with, because there were so many things that were out of date on my website. I'm a neurodivergent person, right?
Yeah.
I need to be in a state of terror or pure excitement to be able to do things. So I changed those things. Yeah, so I really wish I could tell you that there was some real, and I did it. I had a VA until October, and she went back into employment. So at the moment, I am forcing my daughter to become my VA because she...
I've heard this story before from others.
She understands me. She doesn't put up with my nonsense. She understands my neurodivergence.
Yeah.
She's at university.
Great.
She needs to earn the salary I pay her.
Yeah.
So I'm gearing her up to become my VA. But as a, toxic productivity junkie in recovery, when I need to do stuff, I can get it done.
Yeah. So Tamu, one of the things that I wanted to ask you, but actually you've referenced it, is, and of course, the way I research, which comes up with quite a lot of my guests, is fairly thorough.
Yeah.
And when I was looking you up, there were like pages and pages and pages and pages going back to pre-2019. Mm-hmm. But that's when I saw like kind of almost like the stripes that you have earned in business. But one thing I wanted to ask you is, how have you got so noticed from so early on? You talked about having been, in Forbes. You talked about having been in magazines. I think you said stylist. You've done work with stylists as well. What do you think it was that got you noticed, and how did you make those connections with those journalists?
I've got quite a dominant character, not as in domineering over, but I've been on calls with hundreds of people, and then people message me on Instagram saying they noticed me in the Zoom tiles or whatever. So whatever that is, it is. And in terms of the coaching industry, I came from a social work background. So a lot of what I was seeing in the coaching industry didn't really make sense to me, because I understood that is not how human beings grow and thrive. And that's one of the reasons I decided to train as a somatic coach rather than going down one of the more kind of traditional mindset, psychologically based coaching methodologies. So I was always very clear about that. Whilst people were talking about positive thinking, I was talking about how our feelings impact how we think. Okay. When people were talking about, I don't know, whatever it was, I was talking about human needs.
So you stood out.
I stood out.
Yeah.
And also, and it was very interesting that my client referred to me as a contrarian. Girl boss culture was still a thing, and I was not into that. So I was quite different. My first program that really put my business on the map as a business, like creating creating viable money was a 12-month program, where most programs were 3 months or 6 months at a push.
It takes confidence, doesn't it? When you're first starting out to say, I'm going to be attracting clients that are going to commit to a 12 months with me.
Yeah. I don't know if it took confidence. Like, I'm not really a fan of confidence. I find it's too unreliable.
Okay.
But working with people who had huge, significant intergenerational challenges, I understood that to make change that is sustainable, you cannot, like, if you've been operating in functioning freeze for donkey's years, for a decade, 3 months isn't going to touch the surface. So I want to work with people at depth.
Yeah.
So that's why I decided to do that. But yeah, I've been like this since I was a child. You know, I had a period of being bullied at school because I was different to the people I went to school with. I've always been a little bit different, a little bit weird. Is it because of my neurodivergence? I don't know. So I just saw stuff and I just thought, this might sound judgmental, whatever. It just looked very immature. It looked like we were using very immature tools that sound great on a social media caption, but don't actually have a long-term impact.
I think that's a really valuable distinction, because actually what you're saying is it came down to understanding that in order to deliver what you were promising, it actually required that amount of time. So absolutely. I guess the confidence was the belief in knowing that you are the expert. And that's the thing we talk about a lot, don't we? It's like, you know, you are the expert. You are the best person to really advise people on what is going to get them the result. Yeah. So in terms of getting noticed, is that something, have you ever used agencies in terms of, you know, speaking gigs or getting into media or press, or has it always been just with your work?
It's mostly been with my work.
Yeah.
When my book was published, your publisher will do some book marketing and whatnot. And I also hired my own PR person, and I think I worked with them for 6 months.
Oh, wow.
But if you're somebody who is saying something that is different, or you're going against the grain, you're always going to attract people.
So true.
So prior to my book, I had journalists that maybe they were looking for something in particular online and they found something. I'm also very blessed to have people around me who want the people around them to win. So there are people who will say, actually, I'm not the best person for this. Speak to Tamu.
Yeah.
And I maintain relationships. So I've maintained relationships with journalists, not just because it's some kind of transactional thing, but if I know a journalist is interested in a particular thing and I know there are people that could speak on this thing or write about it, then I will refer them. And then I am with a speaking bureau. But that, again, came about, somebody recommended me to do a particular piece of work, and they met with me and liked me. I delivered the piece of work and they were like, do you have a show reel? We'd really like to consider you to be a member of our faculty. Of course, I didn't have a show reel. With my ADHD brain, I thought, I'll get back to that email later. I'll quickly whip together a show reel. And in between that, they found a video. I didn't even think about it, a random video I posted on TikTok. And they said, don't worry about your show reel. We've seen this video on TikTok. We want you to be part of our faculty. So that was that. One of the things I want to express to people, there are some people who need to follow logical steps. They need to have a map of exactly how to get there. Then there are some people who need to know what the destination is, and they need to understand how they show up. So rather than them going to that destination comes to them. That's where my work, that's how I am, and that's the type of person I work with best.
Yeah.
If you are somebody who wants a step-by-step process, I'm not the best person for you. I skip steps. Sometimes I go back because I need to fill things in. But if you are a person who needs the right inspiration and the guidance for you to do that inner self-concept shifting work so that you are showing up like a lighthouse. A lighthouse isn't running up and down the shore. A lighthouse is firmly planted where it is. The light goes round and round. The ship might not be in the right place to see the light, but the light will come round again and it will guide that thing to shore.
Yeah.
That's what and I'm not, I love a bit of manifestation. I am not talking about manifesting per se. I am talking about showing up so vibrantly, so powerfully and certain in who you are, owning your authority so people see you and they feel compelled to come closer. And that coming closer might lead to whatever opportunities. I knew that I had to take aligned action around the time my book was out with publishers, and I just felt really called to take this particular action.
Right.
So I pitched for a particular piece of work with an organization. The person said, "I've got your book. You're playing small. We don't want you to do this thing you've pitched for. We want you to do something else." So I went and did that. So I am definitely going to be pitching more, because I think if I can do all of this stuff just by, sitting on my crown, on my throne and holding court, I could do so much more by by actually pitching for opportunities. But I also recognize that my most wonderful opportunities come from me sitting fully inside my authority and calling in whatever is supposed to be. And sure. I know people might say, that just sounds so uncertain. What I know with all certainty is that is where the magic happens for me. And that magic has legs. It goes on and on and on. My book deal, I didn't sit down saying, right, I've got a social media strategy. I'm going to talk about this thing. I'm very passionate about toxic productivity. I was talking about it. I didn't even realize how much I was talking about it. A publisher DM'd me on Instagram saying, "I love this conversation you're having about toxic productivity. Have you thought about writing a book about it?" Of course I hadn't, but that idea came, and then it has spawned its own web of wonderfulness.
And it feels like when I kind of think of, it feels like such a transitional, I say, couple of years for you. And actually to be sat here, I feel like I'm on the other side of where that transition's happened.
Yeah.
So when you think about future Tamu and what that success will look like, how would you define that for you? What's she doing?
Future version of me is writing more books.
Yeah.
Undertaking research projects so that we can really understand the mechanics behind these things we're grappling with. So at the moment, I am doing some research into the impact of the mandated return to the office. Lots of organizations are doing.
Yeah.
And I'm considering it from the nervous system impact. How's it impacting us on a nervous system level? How's it impacting how we connect with ourselves and each other? So I will be doing that on a bigger scale, whether it is for corporations, whether it is for governments. So there'll be like a think tank element to what I'm doing. And I will also have a leadership certification, which is all about nervous system informed leadership, so that it is as normal. Like, my idea is, I don't know why, I think about stuff like SAP, the accounting system.
Yeah.
That it's just normal to have that within organizations. I want it to be normal within organizations that their middle managers do my leadership training, so that they can create workplaces people actually enjoy working at and want to stay and do their best work and still have time and energy to be in proper relationships with the people they care about the most. And speaking on stages, spreading my message far and wide. That's what I want to be doing. And I will have plenty of time for my creative pursuits, to go to the gym, to enjoy my life. That's what I want to be doing. That's what future me is going to be doing. I can see that vision very clearly. That's what I'm working towards.
I can see that vision clearly too.
Thank you.
Tamu, what 2 or 3 things would you need to do in order to set yourself up for future you?
I'm doing that right now. So one of the things had to be letting go of the groups.
Yeah.
That was just not going to create the space I need to be able to operate in that way. Another thing is I really need to take better care of my energy. I'm getting older. You know, I'm 48 years old.
Looking good on it, Tamu.
Thank you so much. However, age will do what it needs to do. So
yeah, of course.
Like really taking good care of myself, making sure that I'm doing my strength training as non-negotiable, eating well, like really looking after my physical health, because that is the technology that looks after the mental health, the emotional health, and all of those sorts of things. And be more daring. People might look at me and think, oh, you're quite daring as it is. There's a lot of stuff that I would really love to do. So it would be to be more daring and to take more chances. I have a tendency to think, well, I don't have a qualification, so let me learn a bit more before I move forward. I want to be more daring and move forward and learn during the process.
It feels like a really exciting place to be, and I can feel the joy coming through in the way that you have now designed the way in which you're working. Yeah. So, Tamu, thank you for all that you have shared with us. And it's always really sad when I come to the end of a conversation, but particularly one that has been as insightful and energetic as that. But we have a couple of things that we like to do to kind of like just finish off what has been a wonderful conversation. The first is we do something called the atomic clock. It's a 60-second clock.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you a question, and using your area of expertise, ask you in 60 seconds how you would answer that.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, this is very calm reaction.
Feels like Mallet's Mallet. Come on.
Yeah, it is just like Mallet's Mallet, although there's no mallet coming out. Right, okay. Obviously, this is a question I know you're going to be absolutely fine to answer. I will keep an eye on my watch.
Yeah.
So the question is, what are the key signs I need to look at to see if I'm heading for burnout? And what's my first step for change?
Okay, irritation is a major sign of experiencing burnout. Being irritated and frustrated by things you would usually have the capacity for, that's a major sign. Always feeling like you're behind. So you wake up in the morning and say, for example, you decide in 15 minutes I'm going to have a cup of tea, and you don't do that. You start to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm behind. I've lost the whole day. So feeling like you're running out of time. Checking in with yourself and realizing that you're bracing. So your jaw is tight, your shoulders are up, you're clenching yourself. Those are signs. Not having the energy and vitality for the things you used to. So not meeting deadlines, rolling your eyes when there's a meeting that you usually would have been volunteering to take the minutes for or leading. Those are the sorts of things you need to look out for. Not eating well, your sleep being interrupted. Those are all early signs. And these are things that we often neglect because we think it doesn't matter if I'm not sleeping very well, I'll just have some coffee and get through the day. But when these things are happening for 3 months or more, you need to really take a look, because you are heading towards burnout. What was the other bit you asked?
Amazing. Well, that was 60 seconds, but I feel like we do need to hear the next bit. So I'm going to just ask you to just say, and what is the first? So I think a lot of people will be listening very closely to those descriptions. And then let's just take a couple of seconds. What's the first step someone should take?
The first step is to have a look at everything you're doing and ask yourself what is important. Get a sheet of paper, all of these, because we never know how much we're doing because we're just busy, on to the next. Have a piece of paper, write down what's urgent, what's important, what is a priority, and anything that doesn't go on that, drop. That's what I want you to do. Okay. Because a lot of us are carrying around so much busy stuff because we're used to being busy, and we don't recognize how much of that is just not necessary. If you're employed, I would actively encourage you to speak to your manager about it. People think, oh, they're going to think I'm a failure. Actually, your manager is there to help you manage. They're there to help you get through. And if you are self-employed, if you don't have a coach or mentor, I would speak to a trusted friend who does something similar to you or is growth-minded, altitude. You can't speak to people who do not have the same kind of mindset and altitude, not just attitude, altitude as you. But if you are working with a coach or a mentor, speak to them so they can assist you. We need help. We're human beings. We're hardwired for connection. We're not designed to do these things alone. We need to seek help so that we can get the support we need.
Thank you. And I think bearing in mind the nature of the topic, it was really worthwhile kind of getting that extra information there. So I think the atomic clock will have gone around a few times, but thank you, Tamu. I feel like that was really important to address. Right. Final question for you, which is a little bit of a tradition for us. And I would actually personally love to know these. What are you listening to, reading and watching right now?
I am watching a program called C on Apple TV with Jason Momoa. Oh, yes. It's a thriller and it is quite aggressive. Okay. I got into it because my sister recommended it and I'm absolutely hooked. So I'm watching C. Yeah. I am reading Moral Ambition by Rutger Bergman, who's talking about using our ambition for moral good, which I absolutely love. Fabulous. And I have literally just finished reading 7 Days in June by Tia Williams, which is a romance novel. Highly recommend. Okay. And what I'm listening to, I have been revisiting Michael Jackson. I went to go and see Michael Jackson Thriller, whatever the play is called, with my daughter the other day. And I am listening to Dr. Benjamin Hardy's The Secrets of Scaling, or he's got some new audio book, something or the other, The Science of Scaling. That's what it is. That's what I'm listening to. Brilliant. So Michael Jackson, Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And a bit of Jason Momoa thrown in as well. Indeed. Amazing. Tamu, thank you so much. I knew it was going to be an energetic conversation and I really, really appreciate you bringing all of that energy and all of that insight. Thank you. Thank you for having me. That was an interesting episode, wasn't it? And for me, and I know I wasn't the only one that would have been listening to that episode thinking, okay, there were some traits there, particularly when she was talking around what it looks like when you're working too much, that I really noticed. But what I loved about that episode is how passionate Tamu is, how she has almost allowed the permission of the ADHD diagnosis to allow her to build a business that just works for her. Joy is a huge word for her, but I also love the fact that she has those very strong values that have continued to work through her business. And the iteration of the business that she has now is all around what lights her up. And then I think at the end, when she did that breakdown, even though it was over 60 seconds, of what it looks like when you are heading for burnout and what you need to do about it. I think that was super valuable for a lot of people to kind of like just take note. Is there anything there that feels like I need to be a bit more mindful? So yes, another super interesting episode. Thanks so much for listening to Don't Work Harder. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe and share. This show has been brought to you by Atomic, the home of epic business growth. Head to our website at atomic.site to hear more about our business programs and epic events.